Eddie, you were born in 36 on East 112th Street in El Barrio. At 6 years of age, your family moved you to the Bronx. What was Latin music in your developing years as a teenager? What was it like?
Well, from the beginning of El Barrio that I could remember, naturally would be the music that my brother would bring home. And that led to when we moved to the Bronx, because I moved to the Bronx when I was approximately about 6 years old, I believe. And my brother would accompany me in a lot of the shows that we would do together, okay? And Charlie was bringing in, and all of a sudden, the band breaks out, and yo sabía que estaba todo bien.
Vida mía, si tú bien sabes que soy tuyo todavía, si es que cuando yo estoy triste y abatido, me das aliento, corazón, y has comprendido. Adoración, no creas que es pura fantasía, lo que yo siento que eres tú la vida mía. Yo soy consciente, me doy cuenta de las cosas, por eso tú eres pura y bella ni una rosa.
My brother was born in 27, the great Charlie Palmieri, pianist. And then I was born 9 years later. No other sister, no other brother, so I'm a blessing that I was born. And it was my mother that put us on the piano, my brother and I. That was a dream, you know. She was the seamstress, and my father was an electronic genius, really, with radio and television at that time. Television was just starting. You know, listening to the records that my brother would bring home, and that, you know, and then listening to commercial radio and playing stickball in the streets in the Bronx. Because I was born in Manhattan, 112th Street between Madison and Park. It's now called the Charlie Palmieri Way. And then we moved to the Bronx around 1941-42, the break of World War II, and I was raised in the Bronx. Great teachers. Wherever my brother went, I went. My first teacher was Miss Margaret Bonds, B-O-N-D-S. She taught in the Carnegie Hall building. In the top floor, they used to rent out to great teachers. And she was a concert pianist, so she taught piano. My brother was a student, and then my brother recommended me to her. At 11 years old, I used to take the subway and go right to Carnegie Hall, and then I did an evaluation test in the theater next to the Wild Theater, and I got good marks, and I was very happy about that. Then that was our bat. Hit the small dean.
I was going to ask you, you mentioned your late brother, Charlie. How influential was he towards your career?
Oh, he was my whole inspiration. He was the greatest pianist ever. I always say that my brother was the pianist, I'm the piano player. And my brother he was already playing professionally at 14 years of age. He died, unfortunately, 60 years young, the heart attack. But I miss him dearly, and I constantly go visit him at the cemetery and bring a little bit of Hennessy and pour it over over his grave and everything. We have a wonderful relationship, my brother and I. He was very funny, and I love humor, so we had great humor together.
Absolutely. I want to talk about, if we can, because when I was doing my research, you played Carnegie Hall at a very young age. Do you remember that night?
Let me put it this way. What happened was I studied with Miss Margaret Bonds. Miss Margaret Bonds was a concert pianist. She's in the Afro-American Negro, you know, the pianist. She was a concert pianist. She was my brother's teacher. And I used to take the train from the Bronx and go to take my lesson with her. Now, what I did play, her studio was in the Carnegie Hall on the 7th floor, that they had studios for ballet, opera, whatever. And she had her piano studio, beautiful. She was a great pianist. So I did the Wild Theater next to, connected to Carnegie Hall, and there's where I had they presented me in front of different professors, musical professors, and I got a good mark in that. But I didn't play Carnegie Hall itself. It was the Wild Theater because of Miss Margaret Barnes.
Got it. I want
This composer wrote their first compositions at the age of 5 and was an incredible pianist as well. Can you guess who it was? It wasn't Mozart, it was the brilliant Margaret Bonds, and I'm going to tell you all about her this Black History Month. Margaret was born into a musical family in Chicago in 1913, and at the tender age of just 16, she went off to study piano at Northwestern University. She was taught by another iconic American composer, Florence Price, and Margaret Bonds was the first African-American soloist with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, playing her teacher's piece, the Piano Concerto. Margaret Bonds left a huge legacy of pieces, mostly influenced by the African-American spirituals and jazz, and one of her pieces was even performed by the legendary trumpeter Louis Armstrong. So on top of all of that, she was a keen social campaigner. She founded the Margaret Bonds Chamber Music Society, which platformed black musicians and black composers. Of the over 200 pieces that Margaret Bonds wrote, only about 75 of them are left. But today she's credited as being a composer who cultivated a fresh interest in African music, art and culture. If you've never heard any music by Margaret Bonds, one of my absolute favourites is her piano piece, Troubled Water, based on the spiritual Wade in the Water. Go check it out.
For our next artist spotlight in the Black History Month series, meet music legend Margaret Bonds. Margaret Bonds was a composer and pianist born in 1913. She was raised in an artistic and creative home in Chicago. In her 20s, she moved to New York City to pursue her dreams. One of Margaret's most famous songs was a commission for highly acclaimed soprano Leontine Price. He's got the whole world in his hand. Margaret's numerous achievements include the Wanamaker Award for Sea Ghost and a master's degree from Northwestern University. Your legacy lives on, Margaret Bonds. Thank you for sharing your music.
Margaret Bonds took the words of Langston Hughes and turned them into stunning musical works. A composer and pianist, she was one of the first black composers to gain national recognition. Her piece, Troubled Water, based on the spiritual Wade in the Water, showcases her ability to blend classical technique with gospel-infused passion. Margaret Bonds' music remains a powerful voice in American classical repertoire.
Tito Puente and his band are playing on a weekday afternoon in New York's poorest district. Music, he says, keeps the Puerto Rican alive. No one's paying Puente today. Music is his social work. He's joined by pianist Charlie Palmieri.